To them, still translating your existence into bite-sized pieces they can swallow without choking on their own mediocrity. You're still breaking your complexity into simple sentences, hoping they'll finally understand why you move differently, think differently, breathe differently. But here's the truth that will rearrange your entire understanding of yourself in this exact moment. They already know. They've known since the first instant you walked into their space and shifted the very molecular structure of the room. They felt it in their bones when your energy entered and cracked their comfortable little reality like a broken simulation. They've been studying you, cataloging your patterns, trying to decode the frequency you operate on because it doesn't exist anywhere inside their limited spectrum of understanding. Yet what they'll never admit is this: they don't need your explanations. They need you to keep explaining so they can keep pretending they don't already know. You're operating on a completely different plane of existence. It isn't confusion that makes them lean back when you speak, or that alters their voice when they address you. It's recognition mixed with something they can't even name. That unnamed thing is what keeps them awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, replaying conversations with you, trying to understand why your presence feels like standing too close to controlled lightning. They've been pretending not to notice how you process information differently, how you see through their masks before they even finish adjusting them, how you respond to situations with a logic that shouldn't work but somehow always does. Every time you explain yourself, you're not educating them. You're giving them ammunition to pretend they understand what truly exists beyond their comprehension. You're handing them labels they can use to file you away into categories that make them feel safe, sensitive, intense, different, when what they really mean is that you're the anomaly that makes their entire worldview feel fragile. They need you to keep explaining so they can keep reducing you into something manageable, something that doesn't threaten the very foundation of everything they've built their identity upon. Let's talk about what's really happening in those moments when it feels like you're speaking a completely different language. When your words seem to bounce off their consciousness without leaving a dent, you're not failing to communicate. You're broadcasting on a frequency they can only partially receive, like trying to stream 4K video through dial-up internet. Your thoughts move through dimensions they don't even have names for. Your emotions carry colors they've never seen. Your intuition picks up signals from territories they don't yet know exist. When you walk into a room, you don't simply observe. You download the entire emotional ecosystem within seconds, processing micro-expressions, energy shifts, unspoken tensions, and hidden agendas faster than most people can recall their own names. You're reading the metadata of human interaction while they're still stumbling through the surface-level script. That's why conversations with you feel different, why people either gravitate toward you like magnetic north, or retreat, as if you're radioactive. There's no middle ground with someone who operates at your frequency. You either attune, or you step back. You've been slowing down your processing speed, dumbing down your insights, packaging your wisdom into bite-sized pieces so they can digest it without existential indigestion. But every time you do that, you're not just betraying yourself, you're depriving them of the medicine they actually need: exposure to something beyond their current capacity to understand. Your difference isn't a communication problem. Evolution doesn't explain itself to the species it's leaving behind. They watch you navigate situations that would destroy them and wonder how you're still standing, but they can't see the invisible architecture you've built inside yourself after years of being misunderstood. They don't see how every rejection taught you to validate yourself, how every betrayal gave you the blueprints of loyalty, how every moment of isolation became a masterclass in self-sufficiency. You've graduated from advanced training at the University of Solitude, while they're still attending kindergarten classes and social validation. That gap, the canyon between where you are and where they are, can't be explained. It has to be evolved into, and you know what exhausts you more than anything else? It's not the challenges you face, it's the constant translation service you provide for people who only speak the language of surfaces. Every day you're converting multidimensional insights into flat explanations, turning symphonies into ringtones, reducing oceans into puddles just so someone could say, "Oh, I get it now," but they don't get it. They've only received the simplified version, the children's book adaptation of what's truly happening inside your consciousness. You've become so skilled at this translation that you've almost forgotten what it feels like to speak your native tongue, to express yourself without running it through 17 filters of will. They understand this. You've been editing yourself in real time, trimming away the parts that might confuse them, and in doing so, trimming away the very pieces that make you who you are. Every conversation becomes a calculation, a delicate balancing act of how much truth they can handle, how much of your real perspective you can reveal without watching their eyes glaze over, or worse, seeing that flicker of fear when someone realizes they're talking to something they can't categorize. But here's what happens when you stop explaining, when you stop translating, when you stop reducing yourself to fit their comfort level. Something almost magical occurs. The right people begin to understand you without a single word. Those who were meant to hear your frequency tune in automatically, while the static of incompatible connections fades away. You transform into a lighthouse only certain ships can see, and those ships will find their way to you. Not because you explained your light, but because they were already searching for it. The exhaustion you feel isn't from being different. It's from pretending that difference needs justification, explanation, or approval from people who are committed to misunderstanding anything that threatens their worldview. You're tired because you've been carrying the weight of making yourself digestible to people who were never meant to consume your energy in the first place. You've been performing accessibility for an audience that bought tickets to a show they don't even have the capacity to appreciate, then wondering why you feel drained after every performance. Here's something that will completely shift how you see every interaction from now on. They recognize you before you even speak. There's something in the way you hold space, in the way your presence reorganizes the energy of an environment that announces your difference before you ever open your mouth. They've been pretending not to notice, but their body language betrays them. Watch carefully what happens every single time you step into a space. The atmosphere shifts before you even speak, the way their backs straighten when you enter, the subtle tightening in their voices when they address you, the way some overcompensate by trying too hard, while others retreat into silence as if your presence is too much for them to handle. They can't explain it, but you can see through every single performance. That's because you carry what I call energetic authority, and this isn't something you earn through effort, training, or approval from others. It's not a badge, not a skill, not a title. It's who you are. It's coded into your cells, alive in your movements, present in the way you process reality through filters that most people don't even have access to. People feel this authority like a storm rolling in, the atmospheric pressure changing just before lightning cracks the sky. They sense it on levels they can't consciously articulate. Some brace themselves for impact, trying to guard the fragile walls of the lives they've built, while others lean into the electricity because they recognize that being near you might spark a transformation they've secretly been longing for. The recognition isn't intellectual. It's primal. It bypasses the logical mind and hits them in the oldest part of the brain, the place that knows instinctively how to separate predator from prey, leader from follower, catalyst from background character. That's why they react the way they do. Understand this. When they demand that you explain yourself, it's not because they don't get it. It's because your existence without explanation is too powerful for them to process safely. If you're not justifying yourself, if you're not reducing your truth into something small enough for them to file away neatly, then you're just being, and your being unsettles them. Your being forces them to question everything about their own existence. When you stop justifying your perspectives, when you refuse to defend your choices, when you no longer shrink yourself just to fit through the doorways of their understanding, you shift from being something they can dismiss with a casual, "Oh, they're just different," into something they must reckon with. You stop being a puzzle piece they can force into their picture of reality, and instead become an entirely new landscape that demands they either evolve or retreat. And here's the part that terrifies them most. The ones who shout the loudest for explanations are often the ones who feel your power the strongest. Deep down, they know that if they can coax you into explaining, you'll unintentionally give them the map, the step-by-step breakdown of how you became what you are. But the truth is that map doesn't exist. You didn't become this, you revealed it, you excavated it from beneath layers of conditioning, programming, and false identities that were never truly you. They're still walking around armored with that conditioning, mistaking their masks for their real faces while you've shed yours and stood in the rawness of your authenticity. And here's something they'll never want to admit. You cannot teach someone to be what you are, any more than fire can teach water how to burn. Either the elements are present within them, or they're not. The endless requests for you to explain yourself are really veiled cries of desperation. Give us the formula for being what we're too afraid to discover within ourselves. They don't want your story, they want your essence in a blueprint. But essence isn't transferable, and courage can't be borrowed. You've always known things without knowing how you know them. You walk into situations with downloads of truth that would take others hours, days, or even years to gather through study and observation. You feel the truth vibrating beneath the lies. You taste the hidden agenda tucked behind the polite smile. You decode the real conversation happening beneath the spoken words. And yet you've spent too much of your life trying to explain this knowing to people who barely trust their 5 basic senses, let alone the unnamed ones you operate with. How can you possibly explain to someone that you feel intentions radiating from their body like heat signatures? How do you put into words that you can read the entire story their energy tells before their mouth even opens to deliver the carefully edited version? How do you explain that you don't just hear what they say, you hear the silence between their words, the dissonance between what they present and what they conceal? The truth is you can't, and you don't need to, because your life was never meant to be an instruction manual for others to follow step by step. You're not here to give them the formula, you're here to embody the possibility, to remind them that authenticity isn't learned, it's uncovered. And if they really want to know what you know, if they truly crave the freedom they sense in you, they'll have to stop asking you for directions and start excavating themselves. This isn't intuition, at least not the way they've been taught to understand intuition. This is something deeper, something fundamental, something that exists at the very operating system level of who you are. While most people are running on basic programming that says, see the surface, believe the surface, respond to the surface, you're operating on an entirely different code. Your inner system is designed to process far more than what's immediately visible. You simultaneously receive information from the past, present, and future, weaving together emotional, mental, and spiritual data, and probably a dozen other dimensions of existence that human language hasn't even caught up to yet. You're not just picking up on surface cues, you're reading the entire matrix of human interaction, as if it were code scrolling in front of your eyes. That's why you anticipate what people are going to do before they do it. That's why you can feel betrayal weeks before it manifests in physical form. That's why you can spot opportunity in what looks like pure disaster to everyone else. And yet, when you try to explain this knowing, you sound either insane or arrogant to people who live in the prison of prove it. They demand evidence, logic, receipts, proof written in the language of their limited reality. They want you to show your work as if life is a math problem that requires step-by-step calculations. But the truth is, you don't arrive at answers through linear equations. You arrive there through quantum leaps that don't leave footprints. You simply know. And that knowing has been validated so many times by reality itself that you trust it more than you trust the collective consensus everyone else bows to. Still, you felt the pressure to justify it, to tone it down, to make it palatable to those who will never understand. Because some of us didn't come here to walk the conventional paths of understanding, we came here to transcend them. Maybe you've been called too sensitive. They whisper it like it's a weakness, like it's a flaw you should correct. But what they don't realize is that your so-called sensitivity is only the visible tip of a vast, intricate system of perception. You're not too sensitive. You're precisely calibrated. You pick up frequencies they've gone numb to dot. You read the seismograph detecting tremors miles before the earthquake registers on their instruments. You're the weather vane that turns before the storm clouds appear. While they're still debating whether the ground is shaking, you've already left the building, and when it collapses, they turn around and accuse you of being lucky or demand that you explain how you knew. But how do you translate a knowing that isn't bound by their language? How do you articulate something that exists beyond their 5 basic senses, beyond their scientific frameworks, beyond their logic-based validations? Some knowings cannot be explained to those who only believe what they can touch. They want language, they want steps, they want formulas, but some truths are not designed to be dissected into words. They are lived, embodied, and experienced by those who carry them. That's where your power begins to unfold. Because when you stop explaining, when you stop trying to make your reality digestible for people committed to misunderstanding, something profound begins to happen. You begin to move in silence. But this silence is not the silence of defeat or withdrawal. This is not the silence of someone who has been silenced. This is the silence of someone who no longer seeks permission to exist at full capacity. This is the silence of someone who trusts their knowing more than they trust anyone's approval. It's the silence of self-sovereignty. You stop holding committee meetings in your head about how others will react to your decisions. You stop rehearsing defense statements for choices that require no defense. You stop apologizing for existing in your fullness. You stop narrating your every move just to make others feel secure in your evolution. And in that moment, your silence becomes its own language, one that speaks louder than any explanation ever could. And that silence terrifies them, more than your words, more than your logic, more than your presence even, because silence is unarguable, silence is unshakable, silence cannot be debated, dissected, or dismissed. Words can be twisted, explanations can be doubted, but silence leaves them with nothing to grab onto, nothing to counter, nothing to control. And when you move in silence, you become unpredictable, you become uncontrollable, you become uncontainable. This is when they realize the truth they never wanted to face. You are no longer within the confines of their frameworks. You've stepped outside the boundaries of their expectations. You've transcended the need to explain your evolution in their language. And once you stop explaining, you shift from being an anomaly they can argue with into a force they must reckon with. Your silence is not emptiness. It is density. It carries weight. It vibrates with presence. It forces people to confront themselves in ways they've been running from. It unsettles the foundations of their certainty, because in your silence you mirror back to them the limits of their own understanding. They wanted your words to shrink you into something safe. They wanted your explanations to contain you. But when you stop giving them explanations, you stop giving them walls to keep you in. You become boundless. You become untouchable. You become inevitable. And that, more than anything else, is why your silence is your greatest power. And that right there is exactly what they've been trying to prevent all along with their endless demands for explanations. Their constant questioning isn't about curiosity, it's about control. They want to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and where you're going. Not so they can understand you, but so they can position themselves accordingly. If they know your steps, They can shadow you, mimic you, compete with you, or at the very least get out of your way before you expose how fragile their positions truly are. Your transparency is their leverage. Your explanations are their strategy manual. Every word you give them is a piece of ammunition, but the moment you stop broadcasting your moves, the moment you fall silent about your process, you take that power away from them. You leave them standing in the dark, stumbling, trying to piece together fragments of how you leapt from point A to point Z, without ever revealing points B through Y. That silence is where your strength lives. Silent movement has always been the strategy of the most powerful souls throughout history. It's what kings, prophets, mystics, and revolutionaries understood at their core. That explanation is delusion, that justification is weakness, and that the need to be understood is nothing but a cage. A cage you build yourself and then hand over to others with the key still dangling in the lock. When you stop explaining your differences, stop defending your perspectives, stop lowering your vibration just to gain the shallow understanding of people who feed on confusion, something transformative happens. You stop being a player in their game and instead become the game itself. They can't manipulate you with guilt. They can't cage you with judgment. They can't control you with opinion. You slip out of the categories they try to trap you in. You become force instead of form, motion instead of explanation, result instead of theory. And watch what happens when you do this. Watch how the world changes when you stop answering the desperate question, "Why are you like this?" and instead embody it so powerfully that the question itself becomes meaningless. They'll no longer ask why, they'll scramble to keep up with how. You'll see them shifting from dismissing your difference to imitating your behavior, from questioning your methods to studying your results, from doubting your path to desperately trying to extract some formula that they can use for themselves. But by the time they finally recognize what's happening, you'll already be gone, so far ahead that all they'll have left are shadows and echoes of who you used to be. And while they're still dissecting your old footprints, you'll already be evolving into something beyond their comprehension. That's the beauty of it. Your unexplained existence isn't just a mystery, it's a threat, a living, breathing disruption to every carefully constructed identity around you, because you stand as undeniable proof that authenticity doesn't need permission, that freedom doesn't need approval, that power doesn't need translation. Every time you show up without apology, without explanation, without watering yourself down, you create a mirror that exposes the illusions they've been living. You highlight how much energy they waste maintaining masks and identities, rehearsing performances you no longer participate in. And the deeper truth is this: when you stop explaining, you stop giving them handles to grip onto. You stop handing them the blueprint to your inner architecture. You stop making yourself a manual they can study and replicate. Without explanation, you are ungraspable. Without justification, you are uncontainable. They can't argue with your silence, because silence is not empty. It's heavy. Silence carries weight. Silence vibrates with presence. It lingers in the room long after you leave. Unsettling, undeniable. It can't be debated, dissected, or dismissed. This is why your silence terrifies them more than your words ever could. Because words can be twisted, logic can be challenged, explanations can be dismissed, but silence is a void they can't fill. It forces them to confront themselves. It reflects back the gap between their performance and your authenticity, between their illusion and your reality. And in that confrontation, they realize the most threatening truth of all: you no longer play their game. Your silent movement reveals that you've transcended the frameworks they live in. You're not walking the straight, predictable lines they've been taught to follow. You're moving in leaps, in spirals, in dimensions they can't chart. You're no longer a character in their story. You've become the author of your own. And when you stop explaining, you step into the rarest kind of authority: presence without permission, power without apology, transformation without translation. And here's the paradox that haunts them. The less you explain, the more undeniable you become. The less you justify, the more they seek to understand. The less you reveal, the more they obsess. You are no longer something they can categorize. You are something they must reckon with, and reckoning with you forces them to reckon with themselves. That is why your silence is not just absence of sound. It is a storm contained, a revolution unspoken, a force that bends reality without lifting a finger. That is why when you walk in authenticity, when you refuse to explain or apologize, you don't just live, you lead. That's what performance is. An illusion, a stage play built on rehearsed lines and carefully chosen masks. And it's the illusion you've already walked away from while they're still clinging to their scripts, practicing the same tired lines in front of mirrors. You've stepped off the stage entirely. You've stopped performing and started living. That's why you're dangerous. That's why you're the mirror they can't stand to face. Because when they look at you, they don't just see themselves, or they see the masks they've glued to their skin. You expose the costumes, the props, the fake backdrops. You make their entire theater look fragile, and that is why they demand explanations from you. They don't just want to know why you are different. They need you to explain it. Because if you can justify your difference, then they can justify their sameness. If they can attach your uniqueness to a tragic backstory, a diagnosis, a convenient excuse, then they don't have to confront themselves. They want your freedom to come with a wound. They want your strength to come with a scar. They want your authenticity to be the byproduct of pain, so they can keep telling themselves they're lucky to be normal. But what terrifies them is when there is no wound, when there is no excuse, when your difference isn't the result of brokenness, but the result of choice. Because if you're not broken, then their conformity cannot be excused as survival. If you're whole, then their submission isn't wisdom, it's self-betrayal. Your very existence, unapologetically whole and unexplained, suggests a possibility they can't bear to face. That maybe it isn't you who's damaged, but them. Maybe the years they've spent twisting themselves into shapes to fit the crowd. The years they've spent silencing their inner voice just to blend in. Maybe that's the real brokenness. Your wholeness is a living accusation. Every time you show up as yourself without apology, without explanation, without compromise, you hold up a mirror to their smallness. You reveal how much they've shrunk. You expose how much they've given away just to belong to a world that doesn't even love them back. You are proof that the prison they call normal is built on fear. You moving freely is like walking through a prison without shackles while everyone else compares chain sizes. They need to know how you got free. They demand an explanation, a manual, a 12-step plan. But the truth you carry is unexplainable because you didn't break chains, you didn't dig tunnels, you didn't stage a dramatic escape. You simply realized the doors were never locked. You realized the chains weren't steel at all. They were smoke woven from other people's opinions, expectations, and judgments. And when you stopped believing in their reality, the chains evaporated like morning mist. Try explaining that to someone still convinced their shackles are forged from indestructible metal. This is the truth that terrifies the most. You are not different because something happened to you. You are different because you stopped letting things happen to you. You stopped being a passenger in your own existence. You stopped handing over your power to other people's preferences. You stopped outsourcing your choices to the culture of conformity. You stopped swallowing the lie that their reality was the only reality. And that kind of agency, that radical ownership of your existence is something they cannot accept because it exposes their prison as voluntary. Think about that. Your life is proof that the prison walls aren't real, that the locks they fear are illusions, that the bars they grip so tightly are made of words and fears, not iron. And that's what shakes them to their core. Because if freedom was always available, then what excuse do they have for never claiming it? If you're not broken, then what does that say about the way they've broken themselves to conform? If you're whole without explanation, then their entire foundation of normal crumbles. Your silence, your wholeness, your refusal to explain is louder than any speech you could ever give, because when you show up without apology, you make their costumes look like chains. You make their comfort look like captivity. You make their sameness look like surrender. And that's why they cling to their demand for your story, your reason, your tragic explanation, because if you don't give them one, they have to face the truth. You are free because you chose to be, and they are stuck because they choose not to be. That is why your existence is the most disruptive force in the room, not because you shout, not because you argue, not because you fight to prove yourself, but because you don't, because you simply are. And in that being, without apology or explanation, you unravel the performance they've mistaken for reality, and your very existence proves that it's choice, not circumstance, that keeps them stuck. Here's what they don't want you to realize. When you stop explaining yourself, you become magnetic in ways explanation never allowed. The mystery of your unexplained difference generates a gravitational pull that draws in exactly what nourishes you while repelling exactly what drains you. You become selective in attraction, filtering out the curious onlookers who only want to gawk from a safe distance while drawing in those who recognize themselves in your refusal to shrink. Every explanation you give is a map, and maps can be followed by anyone, even those who don't belong on your journey. But when you stop explaining, you become a frequency that only certain people can tune into, a signal only compatible souls can receive. This isn't about secrecy or withholding, it's about knowing your energy speaks louder than words ever could. The right people will understand you through resonance, not explanation. You've been trying to build bridges to people committed to staying on their side, offering detailed justifications for why you had to build your own island instead of drowning in theirs. But bridges can be crossed by enemies as easily as friends, and every explanation becomes another plank in a bridge that maybe should never exist. Some distances are meant to remain, some differences are meant to stand, and not everyone deserves access to the architecture of your soul just because they're curious about why you're built differently. The magnetic effect of unexplained difference is natural selection in your relationships. Those who can't handle not understanding you drift away. Those who need you to be containable find someone else to control. What remains are the rare ones, the souls who don't need to dissect you in order to value you, the ones who can stand in your presence without trying to solve you. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me to trust you, even when physical evidence is lacking. Strengthen my belief in your constant presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts toward me are thoughts of prosperity and not harm, to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always hearing my voice. I lift this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am deeply grateful for your presence in my life and for the abundance you bring. If this message spoke to your heart, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who may need to hear it. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. Every gift, no matter how small, a penny, a prayer, or a share, helps us continue improving our content so we can reach and inspire more people. The link is in the description. Don't stop here. Watch our next video for powerful revelations about the signs that prove you are the chosen one. We've truly enjoyed walking this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Keep shining brightly and embrace your destiny with courage. See you next time.